Okay, I have repeated part 2 one more time, which means, let's do a little recap. I have now got my starting triangle row. I've got one lot of rectangles pointing to the right, one to the left, and a second lot pointing to the right. And of course, my second, my repeat of section 2 means I've got a triangle at the left, and I've finished with a triangle at the right. So with that in mind, we are now ready to move on to part 4, which is the closing row. And the closing row looks like so. Let me get that out of the way. So what you can see is on this sample, I've moved on to the next section. And again, we can have a look at it here. We've got our starting triangle, rib, starting triangle, rectangles going to the left, to the right, rectangles going to the left, second set of rectangles going to the right, and then across the top here we are redirecting the stitches, if you like, to come back to a straight line across the top. Can you see I've got a triangle filling in there, there, and so on. So these are the closing triangles. This is going to just close out that entrelac pattern and allow us to move back into working some nice sort of straight rows. Okay, so let's have a look at how to do so. So just as before, I have ended up with one stitch on my right needle, and I've completed that sort of that little bit of curled up triangle. So we're ready to move on to the closing row section. And the first thing we have to do is pick up just 6 stitches this time, not 7, just 6. So including that one on the end, we're going to have 7 in total. And we're going to be picking them up from the right side of the work. So picking up, just as I did before, this is how I'm going to do it. Put my needle through and actually knit them. And I'm just going to do that 6 times. So that's 1, 5, and I'll come in quite close to that corner, 6. Okay, so I've got 7, 2, 4, 6, and 7. 7 stitches on my right needle, ready to start the first triangle of the closing row. Right, I'm not going to turn my work, even though I've picked up the correct amount of stitches. We're going to start, and I want you to pay attention to this because you're going to be using this sort of in the repeat, and if you forget this, the numbers don't work out. So we're going to start with one of those slip one, knit one, pass, slip stitches over. That's going to sort of bring in these stitches here, and we're starting with that straight away on our right side of our work, just after we've picked up those stitches. So I've got 7 on my right needle. I'm going to slip as if to knit, and then pass that slip stitch over. And that's started already to bring in the stitches of that first rectangle there. Now I can turn, and if you've read forward in this pattern, or if you're working through it, you will see that we're working some wrap and turn stitches here. So if you're familiar with wrap and turn, I've got some great news, and that is, as we work through, we can ignore the wraps, which means we don't have to pick them up as we go, which is music to my ears because I always find that tricky. And if you've not worked them before, please don't worry, because it's really straightforward. We'll work through it together. Right, so I've lost the plot there. 2, 4, 6. Okay, purl 7, and now we get to the wrap and turn section. Now, all wrapping and turning is, the wrap means you're going to wrap the yarn around the stitch, and the turn means you're going to turn your work. Okay, so that's what it actually means. So we're going to wrap this last stitch. Now, I've got my yarn at the front because I'm purling, so I'm going to leave it at the front. And I am going to just simply slip that last stitch from my left needle to my right. I am going to wrap, you see, that's where the words come in, the yarn around that stitch, and it will create a little collar. And then I'm going to pop it back onto my left needle and bring my yarn back to the front. Okay, back to the sort of position it was in when we were purling. So what's happened now is my yarn has gone all the way around that little stitch there. Okay, it's worked all the way round. And here comes, so that's the wrap. Here comes the turn. Literally just turning my work back to the right side and moving on to the next part of this pattern. And I've got myself in a complete pickle. Right, there we go, sorry. Okay, so next row, sorry, not next row at all, next section of this row, I'm going to knit 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and then we're back to that slip 1, knit 1, pass, slip stitch over, and we're back to working across that divide again. You can see, can't you? So all familiar stuff. Slip 1, knit 1, pass, slip stitch over. Okay, all familiar stuff there. The only thing that's new coming in here is this wrapping and turning. And what that will do, it will mean these end stitches get worked less as you go along, and that will just shape that triangle to the correct shape to kind of, like I said, bring it back down to level. It is tremendously impressive and not something I could ever invent myself due to severe not being able to see what on earth's going on. Right, so I'm back on the purl side now, and now I'm going to purl 6 this time. So again, you will notice that each time we work this little series of stitches, we're working 1 less. So I'm working 6 now, 2, 4 and 6. And what that means is I've got 2 stitches left on my needle, and I've wrapped this one. So I'm going to wrap this one now, wrap the one that I've got to. So I've purled 6, wrapping this stitch. So again, my yarn is at the front because I'm purling. I'm just going to slip that next stitch from the left needle to the right, wrap the yarn around it, slip it back onto the left and bring my yarn back through. So now that stitch is also wrapped, and here comes the turn. Turned back to the right side, and off we go again to knit to that divide. 1, 2, 3, and we're going down at 1 stitch again, so we're on 5 on this side as well. 3, 4 and 5. There's our divide. So I'm going to slip the one just before the divide, I'm going to knit the one just after the divide and pass that slip stitch over. Okay, so those are the steps you're going to go through for making this little triangle. So let me go through and get to the last couple of stitches, and we will pick up from there. Right, I'm on the very last bit of this first triangle here. I've purled 2 and wrapped my stitch, and now I've turned, and I'm just going to knit 1, slip 1, knit 1 and pass that slip stitch over. So I've now got nothing left to work, so I know that I've completed that first triangle. So let's have a look at that. So I hold it like that. You can see, can't you? It's closing off. If I give it a bit of a stretch, it's closing off that pattern beautifully. And as I work along there, that's going to make my needles, my rows nice and flat for the final pieces. So it's really, really great. I did want to just move on and just have a very quick chat with you about the next triangle you make, because this time, instead of picking up 6 stitches, you're going to pick up 7. Okay, you're going to pick up 7, and what I want to make sure you do is that first knit 1, slip 1, pass, slip stitch over, else it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So let's just go through the beginning of the next one, and then you'll be absolutely flying. So 7 stitches, I'm going to pick up and knit just the same as before. Right, and here comes my last, that was number 6. Here comes the last one, number 7. Right, so ignore the 2, 4, 6 and 8 from the previous triangle. 2, 4, 6 and 7 now picked up. But before I turn and start my purling, I've got to remember to do that slip 1 and knit 1 and pass the slip stitch over, just to bring that first stitch into play from the next rectangle along. Now I've done that, my numbers are going to work out perfectly, and I can turn and make a start on my next triangle. So I think that's really all you need to be able to make those closing triangles right the way across the top of your piece. So of any tips of all of this, I would say it's just don't forget that very first slip one, knit one, pass, slip stitch over when you've done your stitch pickups, else it just won't work out for you. Okay, so off I go, and I'm going to finish all these triangles and see you at the end. Right, I've done all of the closing triangles for my little piece here, so if you can see, sort of slide it along, you can see they're all filled in at the top, and we're back to a nice sort of flat row of stitches, and we're ready to move on to the collar.